You just paid $2,400 for a 7-day cruise. There's a complimentary pressing service, a mattress upgrade, priority tender boarding, and a mobility accommodation sitting in your cabin steward's closet right now. And you have no idea they exist. Most cruisers over 65 sail home without ever using a single one. And I know what you're thinking. If it's really free, why wouldn't the cruise line just advertise it? And you're not entirely wrong. But here's the thing. Cruise lines staff these services based on projected usage. If only 12% of passengers ask for the free pressing, they only need to staff for that. The second everyone knows about it, it becomes a cost center. So they don't hide it exactly, they just don't promote it. I'm David Calloway. I spent 14 years in cruise ship guest services, started as an associate at 29, worked my way up to assistant front office manager on a luxury line. In fact, I just left that world only 2 months ago. And one of the most frustrating parts of that job was watching the same passengers who could have benefited most from these services walk right past my desk without knowing to ask. These aren't upgrades. They're not perks for suite passengers. They're services built into your fare that every passenger has access to, but only if you know they exist and you know the exact words to use when you ask. Some of them require asking the right person at the right time. Some of them disappear by day 2 if you wait. And a few of them, I'm going to be honest, depend entirely on how you phrase the request. I'll tell you what. The ones that made the biggest difference for the passengers I worked with weren't the flashy ones. They were the quiet ones. The mattress topper that let someone with a bad back actually sleep. The ice delivery for the woman keeping her insulin cold. The priority tender boarding for the man with the cane who didn't want to stand in the sun for 90 minutes. In the next 12 minutes, I'm walking you through all 11. The ones that matter most are toward the end. You don't need all of them. But the 2 or 3 that apply to your situation could completely change how your next cruise feels. Let's get into it. First one. You packed your formal night outfit in a carry-on. It's wrinkled. You're thinking about the $8 per item pressing charge you saw in the cruise planner. Here's what most passengers don't know. Most mainstream and premium lines offer a limited number of complimentary pressing requests per passenger, usually 1 to 3 items for the entire cruise. It's not advertised because it's managed on a first-come basis, and if it runs out, they'd rather upsell you to paid service. Call your cabin steward within the first 24 hours and say this: I'd like to request complimentary pressing if it's still available for this sailing. Not, do you offer free pressing? That invites a no. State it as a known service you're requesting access to. Now, I'll be honest, not every line offers this. It's more common on premium lines than mainstream. And if you're sailing during peak season, when the ship is fully booked, it may already be claimed. But if you ask early, you've got a shot. That one's about looking good for formal night. This next one's about actually sleeping through it. You're 68. Your back doesn't love firm mattresses. You're looking at 7 nights on a bed that feels like plywood. I had a woman come to my desk on embarkation afternoon. I think she was around 71, traveling with her husband. She said, I have a bad back, and I saw online that mattress toppers are available. Is that true? I made one call. Her steward brought it up within 20 minutes. Her friend in the cabin next door didn't ask until day 3. We were out. Cruise lines keep a limited stock of mattress toppers, memory foam pillows, hypoallergenic pillows, and down alternative bedding. It's stored in housekeeping supply closets and distributed on request. Once it's gone, it's gone. Find your cabin steward within the first hour of boarding and say, I'd like to request a mattress topper and an extra firm pillow if available. If you have allergies, add, I also need hypoallergenic bedding due to a sensitivity. The topper isn't going to turn your bed into a luxury hotel mattress, but it makes a difference. And if your back's the thing that keeps you from enjoying your cruise, 20 minutes of asking is worth it. Next, you're keeping medications in your cabin that need to stay cool. Or you just like cold water throughout the day. You're making 3 trips to the ice machine down the hall every afternoon. Most cabin stewards will deliver a bucket of ice to your cabin once or twice a day if you ask early in the cruise. It's not a published service, but it's part of their discretionary offerings, especially for passengers with medical needs or dietary restrictions. On embarkation day, tell your steward, I keep medication that needs to stay cool. Would it be possible to have ice delivered once a day? If it's preference rather than medical, just say, I'd love daily ice service if that's something you're able to do. This one's entirely at the steward's discretion. If they're already managing 18 cabins and half of them have requested something, they may say no. But in my experience, if you ask politely on day one and you're pleasant to work with, most stewards will do it. All right, mobility devices. You brought a walker or a wheelchair. Your cabin is 186 square feet. There's nowhere to put it when you're not using it. Most ships have designated storage areas on each deck for mobility devices. Your steward can tag your walker or wheelchair and store it in a secure closet when you're in the cabin. When you need it, you call, and they bring it back. When you need it, you call, and they bring it back. Ask your steward, is there secured storage available for my walker during the cruise? I'd like to keep it out of the cabin when I'm not using it. This isn't available on every ship, and some older vessels just don't have the space. But on newer builds, especially the ones designed with accessibility in mind, it's standard. Worth asking. Those first four are about comfort. This next one's about time. You're docked at a port that requires tender boats to get ashore. You've got a cane or you move slowly. You're watching from deck 5 as 400 people line up ahead of you, knowing it's going to take 90 minutes to get on a boat. Every cruise line I worked for had a priority tender list for passengers with mobility limitations, but it's not automatic. You have to request it in advance, either pre-cruise through accessibility services or on embarkation day at guest services. Go to the guest services desk on day 1 and say, I have mobility limitations and I'd like to be added to the priority tender list for ports that require it. They'll make a note in your reservation. When tender ports come up, you'll get called early. I process this request probably twice a week. The passengers who did it got off the ship in the first or second group. The ones who showed up at the tender platform on port day and asked for priority then, we couldn't help them. The list was already set. Priority doesn't mean instantaneous. You're still tendering with a group, but instead of waiting in a 200-person line in the sun, you're boarding in the first wave, with maybe 15 other passengers who requested it. All right, those are the foundation ones. The next 6 get into territory most passengers never even think to ask about. It's your 50th wedding anniversary. You're on a cruise to celebrate. You've heard the specialty restaurants are $55 per person and you didn't budget for it. Here's what most passengers don't know. Most cruise lines will comp a specialty dining reservation if it's a documented milestone: birthday, anniversary, honeymoon. The key word is documented. It has to be in your passenger profile before you board. If you mention it for the first time at the restaurant, it's too late. If you didn't add it during booking, go to guest services on embarkation day and say, today is our 50th anniversary. I'd like to request a complimentary specialty dining reservation if that's available as a courtesy. This isn't guaranteed. I've seen it approved and I've seen it denied. It depends on the line, the ship, how full the restaurants are, and frankly, how the guest services officer is feeling that day. But I approved it more often than I denied it, especially if the passenger was kind about it. That one's a maybe. This next one is a definite, if you ask the right person. You're 72. You've got 2 suitcases. The porter dropped them outside your cabin door and left. Now you're dragging 50 pounds of luggage over the door frame by yourself. On most ships, if you call your cabin steward or guest services immediately after your luggage is delivered, they'll send someone to bring it fully into your cabin and even help you lift it onto the luggage rack. It's not advertised because it's labor-intensive, but it's available. Call the steward and say, my luggage was just delivered and I need assistance bringing it into the cabin. Is someone available to help? I had a man in his mid-70s call down once. Very polite. Said his wife had just had knee surgery and they couldn't lift the bags. I sent a room steward up. Took 3 minutes. The man came to my desk later that day just to say thank you. That's the kind of thing that should have happened automatically, but it doesn't unless you ask. Some stewards will do this without being asked. Some won't. It depends on staffing and timing. But if you need it, ask. No one's going to judge you for it. Next, you're traveling with insulin or another medication that has to stay between 36 and 46 degrees. The mini fridge in your cabin goes down to maybe 50 on a good day. Ships have medical-grade refrigeration in the medical center, and they'll store passenger medications that require strict temperature control. This is not the same as asking your steward to clear the mini fridge. This is actual pharmaceutical-grade cold storage. Call the medical center on embarkation day and say, I'm traveling with insulin that requires refrigeration between 36 and 46 degrees. Can I store it in the medical center for the duration of the cruise? They'll ask you to bring it down in a labeled container. You'll have to go to the medical center to retrieve it when you need it. They're not delivering it to your cabin. But if the alternative is your medication spoiling, it's worth the walk. Your cabin is under the pool deck. It's 11 o'clock at night. There's a DJ directly above your head, and it sounds like he's in your bathroom. Cruise lines have noise policies, but most passengers don't know you can request formal enforcement if your cabin is impacted. If you report it to guest services and it's violating the posted quiet hours, they'll send security to address it. Call guest services and say, "I'm in cabin such and such. There's excessive noise from the pool deck above me, and it's past the posted quiet hours. I'd like to request enforcement." I worked on a ship where the nightclub was directly above a row of inside cabins. We got calls every single sailing. The passengers who called on night 1 and referenced the noise policy got action. The ones who suffered in silence for 3 days and then complained on day 4, we helped them. But the frustration had already happened. Sometimes the noise is unavoidable. If you're under the jogging track and someone's running at 6 in the morning, that's not a violation. But if it's amplified music or crowds past midnight, you've got a case. If you're finding this helpful, go ahead and subscribe. I'm posting this kind of thing every week. The stuff I couldn't say when I was still working on ships. You booked an inside cabin to save money. You get on board and realize the motion of the ship in that location is making you nauseous, or the cabin's not accessible the way you thought it would be. If you have a documented medical or accessibility need, guest services can move you to a different cabin at no charge, assuming one's available. The key is having documentation and asking within the first 24 hours. Go to guest services and say, "I have a medical condition that's being aggravated by the motion in this cabin location. I'd like to request a stateroom move if there's availability." If it's accessibility, say, "This cabin doesn't meet my documented accessibility needs. I need to request a move to an accessible stateroom." This only works if the ship isn't sold out. And if you're asking for a move from an inside to a balcony just because you changed your mind, that's not happening. But if it's genuinely medical or accessibility related, and you've got a letter from a doctor or documentation in your profile, they'll work with you. Last one. And this is the one that changed cruising for more passengers than anything else I ever set up. You're diabetic. You need to eat at specific times. The main dining room closes at 9:30. You need something at 11 at night that isn't pizza or a burger. Room service is free on most lines, but what most passengers don't know is that if you have a documented dietary restriction or medical need, you can request specific meal delivery outside of standard room service hours. The galley will prepare it and send it up. On embarkation day, go to guest services or the dining desk and say, "I'm diabetic and I need access to specific meals outside of standard dining hours due to my condition. Can I arrange for late-night meal delivery with the galley?" I had a passenger with Crohn's disease who needed plain, low-residue meals at specific times throughout the day. We set it up with the executive chef on day 1. Every meal was delivered to her cabin exactly when she needed it, prepared to her specifications. She told me on the last day it was the first cruise she'd ever taken where she didn't spend half of it feeling sick. This requires coordination, and it's not instantaneous. You're not going to call at midnight and have a meal show up in 15 minutes. But if you set it up in advance and you've got a legitimate medical need, the galley will accommodate you. All right, that's all 11. Here's the thread. Every single one of these services exists because cruise lines know that certain passengers need them, but they're not going to announce them ship-wide because the second everyone asks, the logistics fall apart and the cost goes up. So they're available, but only if you know they exist, and only if you ask early. You don't need to request all 11. Pick the 2 or 3 that actually apply to your situation. Ask on embarkation day or within the first 24 hours. Be polite. Be specific. And if they say no, ask if there's an alternative. The thing I learned after 14 years is this. The passengers who had the best cruises weren't the ones in suites. They were the ones who understood the system and knew how to work with it instead of against it. They asked questions. They made requests. They didn't assume that what they saw was all that was available. And listen, I get it. You shouldn't have to know secret phrases or hunt down your steward in the first hour to get a mattress topper. But that's how it works. And since that's the reality, you might as well use it to your advantage. So here's what you do before your next cruise. Screenshot this list. Write down the 2 or 3 services that matter for your situation. When you board, find your cabin steward. Go to guest services. Call the medical center if you need to, and ask for the services that apply to you. Use the exact words I gave you. Be kind, be direct, and ask early. The worst thing that happens is they say no. The best thing that happens is you sleep better. You eat on your schedule. You don't stand in the sun for 90 minutes waiting for a tender. And you actually enjoy the cruise you paid for. That's what these services are for. They're not tricks, they're not loopholes. They're built into the experience. You just have to know to ask. If this saved you even one uncomfortable night or one frustrating port day, then it was worth putting together. Next video covers the embarkation day timing mistake that gets more seniors stuck in long lines than anything else, and the exact window you need to hit to skip most of it entirely.